Hi, this is muthyamanisandeep, English News. Today news about people's democracy. Organization arguments share of non-food expenditure. The Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation has recently released the findings of the Household Consumption Expenditure Survey conducted during August 2022 to July 2023. Household consumption surveys earlier were conducted every 5 years, but the last HCES was conducted in 2011 to 12. In between, on HCES was conducted and the report was not made public as that showed a decline in consumption expenditure, which could have been a cause of embarrassment for the existing government. Hence, after more than a decade, we are able to know the consumption patterns of average Indian households of rural and urban India. Periodic consumption expenditure surveys show how Indian households consume food and non-food items, and since poverty line is usually defined by minimum calorie intake and consumption of minimum non-food necessaries, HCES enables the estimate of the number of people below and the poverty line. The current survey collects data from 2.6 lakhs households, and the sample covers both rural 1.5 lakh and urban 1.1 lakh households. The sampling techniques are well defined by the NSSO and define the Saturn and sub-Saturn of the sample as constructed in respective surveys. Findings from various surveys are comparable only when the construction of the sample remains same and poverty lines as well as distribution of households below and above the poverty line can also be compared across surveys when the sampling theorem remains the same. This time, the survey also includes imputed values of items received free of cost through social transfer schemes. The fact is, during previous surveys, even it may people received food or various non-food items such as healthy services or education as part of public provisioning were not imputed into household expenditures. Simple consumption and comparable. The NITI Ayoga counts that the percentage of people below the poverty line has come down to 5% according to the recent survey results. It is important to note that the sampling theorem and sub-theorem has undergone changes in the current survey in terms of defining rural and urban theorem. It categorizes rural on basis of distance from district headquarters rather than household status and activity, and urban on the basis population and affluence status rather than monthly per capita income. In terms of categorizing rural households, the parameter chosen is access and ownership the land, which actually underrepresents the vast section of rural population who landless and constitutes the majority of the rural population. In the urban segment, sub-theorem has been defined by availability of four-wheeler cars of non-commercial use which price more than 10 lakhs and less than rupees 10 lakhs, and households without cars. Only 8% of the people of India own car, and hence consideration of urban households having access to cars grossly underrepresents of vast majority of the poor urban population. In other words, the sample, unlike previous round of survey, based towards the majority of the poor urban population. Well, to do that influences outcomes the survey, it is that therefore difficult to compare the findings the current survey with the earlier ones. Second consumption expenditure survey estimates expenditure of various items and food and non-categories, and these do not remain same. It is true that average consumption baskets change over time and the boundaries of discretionary and non-discretionary expenditures change as well. With the change in work pattern, use of human energy in the work process also changes, the hence mix of necessities undergo change over time. Unfortunately, there is a need to revise the list of items considered food and non-food categories for the survey over time, but that also demands redefining of the poverty line according to changing consumption patterns. This is precisely the reason why poverty estimates need to be revised. The current survey includes new items but uses earlier poverty line and with a sample that is based in favor of the relatively well-to-do households. In fact, the below people poverty has line declined. In consumption expenditure, in capitalism, richness is manufactured not by consuming more, even though the consumption expenditure of the rich in India is roughly 10 times of that the poor, rather is reflected by accumulated exchange value in the form of money, income and wealth, assets from which the rich derives power and control over market and society. Rising non-food expenditure. The survey also highlights the changing pattern of consumption expenditure of Indian household over the years, that is rising share of non-food within the consumption basket and also non-kernels within food group of consumption expenditure. This decline has been a secular trend in previous rounds of survey and nothing so surprising as we see since 1993 to 94. As the per capita income increases, the share of food in total expenditure declines, and also within food, the consumption of fuels also trends to decline. More importantly, retired parents change with income, and over time, the boundaries between necessaries and discretionary consumption also undergoes change. The shares of food expenditure both in urban and rural areas, as the survey suggests, in marginally higher weight transfer driven consumption is intuitive for obvious reason, as it mainly adds to food consumption procured from schemes. But it also important the increasing commodification of medical care, education and consumption of communication have also established the boundaries of necessary and discretionary consumption. If people have to spend more on medical care and education on mobile phones, which is not discretionary anymore as it was 3 decades back. So, sphere of non-food expenditure increases. It is a combined effect of changing needs and the contraction of public provisioning of many of the essential services. The difference in consumption expenditure by regions and class declines over time because consumption increases less than proportionally to income. The rich does not consume proportionally as their income increases, while for the poor higher proportions of incomes the spent in consumption. This is for socialistic system. Share and subscribe.